Okay, Nick and Andy, it's time to preview US men's national team against Jamaica, CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinal. It's over 2 legs in this international break, away and then home against Jamaica. Nick Mendola, what are your thoughts on this? Remember, everyone, you can watch in Spanish on Telemundo Universal, our Spanish language partners. So we'll have a close look at Pochettino in his second camp in charge. But coming up against Steve McLaren's Jamaica, this is a kind of a step up for him, Poch, in this window.
Yeah, and a strange squad, and I'm not questioning it. He's got to evaluate the pool. Very nervous about what's supposed to happen up top outside of Christian Pulisic being magic. It's kind of a mixed bag. 3 players, I believe 3 players playing in Liga MX who we don't see every week necessarily, and I just don't really know what to expect there. And I'm, outside of the midfield, I don't know what to expect, right? He's only brought in 2 fullbacks, and could we see a back 3? There's just so many questions against a Jamaica team that manager Steve McLaren is pushing the right recruitment buttons to bring players we do know into the fold. So I just think this is it's about as interesting as it's going to get for a little while for the USMNT.
It is, right, Andy? I mean, when we look at the importance of this game, okay, it might not be the most important game the US have played over the last few years, but is it important to have this meaningful kind of win or you're done scenario for Pochettino after the friendlies last month, where he was, like Nick mentioned, able to bed in a few new players, a lot of injuries. He has a few players back from this window, like Tim Weah, obviously Chris Richards being back in the squad, but there's not long until 2026 in the World Cup now. When we think about after this, he has a whole break apart from the January camp. And it's March 2025 until this full main squad gets back together. So time is of the essence for Pochettino. And this is important. This kind of environment, this game against Jamaica will be stubborn, dangerous going forward. I'm excited for this to see how they stand up to the challenge.
Yeah, and there's a little slight extra motivation. Only team that's won CONCACAF Nations League thus far, keeping that, that record intact right there, and just asserting a bit of dominance regionally, even as you go through a coaching change and you bring in someone new and all of the factors that have been at play of late. I do love that this is the matchup that they get during this window at this point in the calendar, during this point of the World Cup cycle, because it could have just as easily, had they beaten Mexico last window, they could have been playing Suriname, and that's not going to really teach us much, I don't think, over 180 minutes about this team. They show up, they win, they advance to the semifinals, and then we're talking about this team hasn't played anybody since yada, yada, yada. Well, at least they get Jamaica now for a couple of games. It is going to be an interesting test. It'll be interesting to see how Poch sets the team up. To Nick's point, there's a lot of versatile options in this team. Like even Christian Pulisic, who, the one that we look at and say, if somebody has to carry this team, it's going to be you, can play in a number of different roles. And we've seen that throughout his career. I tend to think that just given what we've seen from Poch in the past, that it's going to be a pretty standard, probably 4-2-3-1 setup. And that's probably the safest way to go. It's probably the most stable way to go. And I'm excited. Timmy Weah back in the team now with a new coach. He was not there last window. There's a number of players that weren't there last window, and it just didn't look very good. So you bring back some of those pieces and you slowly start to build it, and you see the ideas that Poch is going to put into this team. So I am very excited for this matchup because, to your point, Joe, it's going to be a while until we actually learn anything about this team and this group of players after this window.
And this group of players, Nick, I mean, who do we think is the biggest opportunity in this window? Who we're most excited to see? Because Nick mentioned there, Tim Weah, having him on one wing, Christian Pulisic on the other, Ricardo Pepi maybe up top. It looks like he might get the nod starting. And, of course, Weston McKennie, he's going to be available to play in this camp, which is huge. And I think excited to see what he does. And Yunus Musa maybe in that hybrid kind of right wing-back role. He does go 3 at the back, given the lack of fullbacks Pochettino has named in this squad. So there's a few players there, obviously missing the likes of Carter Vickers, Tyler Adams for injury, Sergino Dest still out. So there's still a few missing pieces, but we're getting closer to this full-strength lineup that Pochettino can use. So who are you looking forward to seeing, mate?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Chris Richards, assuming he's healthy enough to start, because we haven't seen him in a little bit in the Premier League, but he has been relied on by a couple of managers that I think we have respect for at Palace. So will he deliver the goods? I think I'm most interested by two names, and that's one is Tanner Tessman, who made a move to Lyon, and I think gets an opportunity perhaps here with Tyler Adams not there. And maybe that's a little bit surprising. I understand why, as Poch has spoken about being pro-club and understanding the situations there. And then it's Pepe for me, who I just don't think I understand yet. And I keep forgetting that he's 21 because he got pulled along so early. He scores goals. I don't know that he ever wows you, but he scores goals. And he's athletic and he's big, and he should have the chance to finish. He's not 22 until January. So to me, he might be an answer that that we didn't quite expect, and yet maybe the only answer we should have expected. It's a chance for him to say, hey, Fuller and Balogun, when you're healthy, you're going to have some work to do every time you want to be starting at the 9.
Yeah, it's so interesting with this squad because the opportunities are there for so many players to stake a claim, maybe not to start, but to say you can rely on me when Balogun, when Dest, when Adams, Carter Vickers, these kind of players are clearly going to be starters under Pochettino if they keep their current form and stay fit. But the opportunity almost for these guys who will get minutes against Jamaica is to just stay there and show Pochettino that they can be relied on, they can be trusted, even if it's not from the start. And again, not many games between now and the World Cup on home soil. So you have to make the most of these minutes if you're in this US squad. And we know how big and how deep the player pool is now. Just look at the names of clubs that some of these players have now moved to, kind of shuffling themselves around Europe and elsewhere in order to get in that roster and that squad for the World Cup on home soil. Andy, Jamaica, they look very dangerous. On paper, Steve McLaren obviously has gone for a slightly different squad. He's been able to bring Leon Bailey back in, which is a huge bonus for them up front. Obviously, Mikel Antonio, Damari Gray. I mean, those are 3 very good forward players there. Maybe a bit imbalanced defensively, but they have some veteran players back there. Ethan Pinnock from Brentford. Again, like Nick mentioned, a lot of names we know well on this Jamaica squad. So I guess for Steve McLaren, this is a decent job for him to take because you'd imagine that Jamaica will qualify pretty comfortably for the 2026 World Cup, given that USA, Canada, and Mexico don't have to from the CONCACAF region. So what do you make of them? And they'll be fancy their chances of a bit of an upset here.
You know, I love this from Jamaica. I absolutely love it. We've been asking for a time, and Canada filled this void a bit, you know, as a third CONCACAF nation that has risen up and competed with the U.S. and Mexico, to have a fourth one now that builds interest and excitement within the region as well, doing it with some Premier League players who have some dual national eligibility. I think it's a no-brainer. You have to do it. It's not too dissimilar to what the U.S. did with Jurgen Klinsmann in 2014. And I know that wasn't the objective at the time, but it was one of the benefits of bringing in that coach. And I just gave Jurgen Klinsmann a compliment, I think. And so Steve McLaren going in there and bringing in, having the name recognition to be able to bring in talent like that and make those players feel comfortable in probably a very new culture that maybe they don't have a ton of experience living in because it is kind of a distant thing, I think, for some of them, and an opportunity to get in touch with their roots and where their family comes from, and all the while getting to have an international career. So I love this from Jamaica. I am a bit worried about what this could turn into long term because they do have Premier League quality defenders now at this point. And that's not really something that I think we can say about the U.S. It's kind of strung together a little bit, and they're going to have higher caliber players that are going to be interested in the program going forward as well. And so the 3 up top that you mentioned there, Joe, going to pose a lot of problems on the counterattack for the U.S. And as good as Tim Ream has been for a number of years now, not having Cameron Carter-Vickers in there is a bit of a worry, especially Chris Richards maybe coming off the injury, like Nick said. So this is a difficult and slightly dangerous test, especially going away in the first leg for the U.S. But that's exactly what we want at this point of the cycle. So I am very ready for these 2 games. I've never been excited like this for a November international window before.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, right, Nick? I mean, when we look at sort of the key battles, I mean, what are you looking for in this game? Christian Pulisic's obviously the main man. He'll be marked very closely and very tightly, but you have Pinnock, you have Mason Holgate back there for Jamaica. You have to think the US will still have enough in attack, right? But Jamaica's dangerous on the counter-attack. We've seen that when they played the US in recent games, especially with Antonio up there. So what are you expecting?
I don't know. I still expect it to be a challenge, of course, but I wish I knew what they were doing at fullback, because if you were to tell me that Anthony Robinson is capable of playing 180 minutes on the left side, I would tell you, all right, great, they'll be fine. But what are their options when he gets tired against Leon Bailey? What are their options? That's what I'm just not so sure of. And I think they'll score. I think they'll win over 2 legs, no doubt. But it's just that little bit of, what's he doing? What's Poch doing? What's the idea here that I don't quite get? Is Chris Richards a fullback? Is Yunus Musa a fullback? Is somebody else a full? When I say fullback, I mean wing back. I think we all know what I'm talking about. But I don't know what he's doing, and I'm excited to find out what he's doing.
Andy, you think they're going to do it and make it through to the Nations League semifinals in March?
Yeah, I think they will. There's even the little bit of familiarity that they have playing under Pochettino. Like you saw, especially in the game against Panama, you saw something to build on, and you saw what the ideas are going to look like. And you start to bring back in the first teamers. You get Weston McKennie back in, you get Tim Weah back in, and just start building that group back up and build a little bit of momentum. Yeah, I think maybe early on it doesn't look the prettiest, but I think over the course of 2 games, I think this is, and we've already talked about it, it's pivotal, but I do think we see real progression from the group in this window.
Yeah, me too. I think it'll be tight, it'll be close, but yeah, I'm expecting it all to be played for in the second leg as well at home, but I think that will just work in the USA's favor. So head over to Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com for all the information about how to watch this game, live analysis, reaction, recap. We'll have you covered for both of these CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals. And remember, you can watch this game in Spanish on Peacock, Telemundo Universal, all across our Spanish language platforms here at NBC Sports. Thanks, Nick and Andy, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and go USA. Cheers.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host of NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And if you want even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock.